Welcome back to another episode of the Learn, Dream, Do show. Today we're going to talk about museums. We have a ton here in Fort Worth. What exactly is a museum? Well, you might think of it as just a place with a bunch of old stuff, but they are so much more than that. Museums take care of artifacts and tell stories. Artifacts can be things like dinosaur bones at the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History, a painting in the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth, or a famous saddle in a history museum like the National Cowgirl Museum or Sid Richardson Museum. Museums can also have something a little more outside of the box, like a historical reenactment, where actors bring history to life right before your eyes, like at the Log Cabin Village, or interactive dinosaur digs, like at the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History.
The word museum comes from the Greek word mauseon, which was a place or temple dedicated to the Muses. In ancient Greek and Roman mythology, the Muses were 9 sister goddesses who were said to inspire people to sing, dance, and write poetry. Before poets or composers in ancient times began any great work, they asked the Muses for help. So the next time we visit a museum and see collections that are important to art, history, and science, let's think of the Muses. Maybe they'll inspire us too.
Now that we know where the word museum comes from, let's talk about the parts of the museum that you can see. The first thing you might see is the actual building itself. A lot of design goes into building a museum. Here's an example. It is the Kimball Art Museum located in Fort Worth, Texas. Many people consider the building itself to be a work of art. So what's so special about this museum? The Kimball Museum has northern-facing windows that lets light onto an arched ceiling. This archway bounces the light around and disperses it in a way that makes the natural sunlight much gentler. This is important because dispersed northern light is less likely to damage the artwork inside. Have you ever left a toy outside for many days? Harsh full sunlight can bleach objects, but this gentle filtered light won't damage any of the artwork inside the museum. Many museums have designed solutions to provide the best lighting. Once you are done admiring the building, you might want to check out the artwork. Museums usually have a permanent collection. This consists of objects, artifacts, or pieces of art that are collected and owned by a museum. Usually, permanent collections are in more open spaces and are easier to access. In contrast, temporary exhibits have a specified time frame. Objects featured in temporary exhibits might be on loan from another museum, or they might be archived by the museum and only taken out during special exhibition times. Sometimes museums will feature artifacts. These are everyday household items or historical items that give us a view into the history of peoples of the past. Other times, museums will feature art. It could be contemporary, that means something of this time period, or historical. Don't forget to walk around the outside of a museum. Oftentimes, you'll run into statues and artistic landscaping. It's a great way to enjoy nature and art in a peaceful place. Just because you've been to a museum once doesn't mean that you shouldn't go again. Museums are filled with movable walls, and they often go under construction to change up the exhibits and art or artifacts inside. There's so many different types of museums. Some museums will specialize in a culture, an art style, or a time period. What museums are you interested in looking at?
Hola a todos, hello everyone, and welcome to Un Minuto en Español. As you can see, I am visiting a museum, or museo. My favorite type of museos are the kind that lets you see some really weird stuff, better known as oddities or curiosidades, and where I can get to see unusual artifacts or artefactos. But don't get me wrong, I also like to go to museos where you get to learn about science or ciencias. Okay, so I like all types of museos. Lucky for me, I live in Fort Worth where I have a whole lot of museos. How about you? What is your favorite museo?
I went to a museum and asked if I could take a picture, but the guards said they had to stay on the walls.
Have you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes at a museum? I asked Allie Rogers-Andreen at the Eamon Carter Museum to give us a special peek into some of the people who helped create the stories there. Take it away, Allie.
We heard that you were learning all about museums today, and so we thought it might be fun for you to visit this art museum and see some of the important people that work here and make it run every day. When you visit the museum, you might see paintings and photographs hanging on the walls, and you might see sculptures sitting on pedestals or even hanging from the ceiling. You might visit the people that work in the galleries, or visit the museum shop, or even go into the library and see who's reading books. But, you know, it takes a lot of people to make sure that all of that is ready for you. And so today we're going to meet 3 people that work here at the museum. We're going to meet an archivist, a curator, and the head of facilities. And they're going to show you some quick behind the scenes stories about what it's like working here. See you inside. We are here with our first special museum guest. This is my friend John Fremling, and he is the head archivist here at the Eamon Carter Museum of American Art. And he's here to tell us what that is.
Absolutely. An archivist in many ways is very much like a special librarian. So librarians often work with books, published things. Archivists are using or caring for unique one-of-a-kind things. So handwritten documents, artifacts, things that are used or created by the people that are in the larger art collection. And they're unique as opposed to published, so you cannot find these things anywhere else. So they're one of a kind.
We want to learn as much as we can about the artwork. And so it sounds like when I'm planning education programs, or when our curators are planning exhibitions, this might be a really great resource for them to do some research.
Absolutely. It's how we tell that bigger story. So it's always that bigger idea that the picture is so much more interesting if you know what's going on around it. What is the story behind the picture?
Story behind the picture. That's always very exciting. I'd love to hear more about some of the items from our archives.
This is a camera that Laura Gilpin used, another one of our photographer archives that we have. Again, all her letters, diaries, scrapbooks, and all that kind of material.
Well, so now we've already met John in the archives, and now we get to meet another museum friend. This is my friend Alfred Walker, and he is head of facilities here at the Eamon Carter. Alfred, what does the facilities department do in the museum?
Well, the facilities department does a lot. First of all, when you come to the museum, we hope that you find the museum clean, very clean facility. Well, we take pride in that. Another important part or task that we take on every day is to make sure that the museum environment, right, the temperature and humidity is kept at a safe level for the works of art.
Can you tell us a little bit about what goes into putting lights on the artworks?
One cool thing about it, it's not just shining light on a work of art. It starts a lot early on in that. So you're working with curators, you're working with the conservation staff to understand what are your limits. And then sometimes, this is cool, wait, now check, this is a secret now, I'm gonna let it out. But sometimes I get to talk to the artists, right? And I always pick the artist's brain. Hey, how do you want people to see your work? What can I do to make it look like you were thinking when you painted it?
Well, thank you so much, Alfred, for introducing what goes on behind the scenes at the museum and telling us about lighting the artwork. It's such an interesting thing that I don't always think about when I'm walking through the galleries. So now we've met John, we've met Alfred, we've talked about the archives, we talked about the building, and now we get to meet my friend Maggie Adler, who is a curator here at the museum. Maggie, what is a curator? What do they do?
We have one of the best jobs in the museum because curators get to work with artists or with artworks made by artists to figure out what tells a good story, what makes a good exhibition. So when you come to the museum, all the works on the wall that you see together are called an exhibition. So sometimes I get to work with artists like Justin Favela or Mark Dion and help them make their artistic dreams come true by figuring out how we can get their materials into the museum and how we can pay them for their work and how we might write about them and talk about them as artists. And sometimes I'm working with artists from a really, really long time ago who are no longer with us, but their works are with us. So I have to try to figure out what was going on in their heads and in their imaginations hundreds of years ago, before any of us were born.
So when I come and visit the Carter and I'm walking through the galleries, curators are the reasons why certain paintings are hanging on certain walls and certain sculptures are in certain places. Y'all get to decide how everything looks and the order everything goes in.
We get to make the decisions and the colors. We choose the colors on the wall. We choose, sometimes I'm the voice that's talking to you when you read those labels on the wall. That's stuff that I've written.
Goodness. So if you like looking at art and talking to artists, and if you like writing, then maybe being a curator might be what you want to do. Thank you so much for visiting us here at the Carter today, and I hope we get to see you soon. You can visit us in person, or you can visit us online at www.cartermuseum.org.
Museums are really fun to visit, but they're also fun to make. Let's get creative and think like a designer and create our own mini museum exhibit.
To create a museum, you're definitely going to want to grab a box, glue, and scissors, but everything else is up to you, so get creative. Think of what kind of museum you'd like and locate the items you would need to tell a story and put them on display. Here's what I'll be using to make my museum. The first thing I'm going to do is wrap my box in white paper so that my exhibit will be a little bit more pleasing to the eye. The next thing I'm going to do is cut out photos from these Loteria cards and glue them on the walls of my museum. I'm going to pretend that they're unique paintings in a museum. If your caregiver isn't so keen on the idea of recycling their Loteria game for your museum, you can use pictures from old magazines, print pictures, or even draw them yourself. Now it's time for me to make my sculptures and display cases. I'm using some old glitter containers and felt to make the display cases, and I'm going to use some random trinkets I found around the house to design my own sculptures. Okay, so I've added my display cases to the exhibit, so now it's time to add an area where everyone can sit comfortably and admire my exhibit. And now finally, I'm adding people. It looks like Barbie is stopping by. And so is Violet. Oh, and some firemen wanted to check out the new art in the museum. And ta-da! We finished our own mini museum.
And now it's your turn. What are you going to place inside your own mini museum?
There seems to be a museum for just about everything. Let's recap some of the stranger museums out there. If you travel over to England, you can check out the Dog Collar Museum. Nearly 500,000 pet lovers visit this museum every year. Germany has the Museum of Bread Culture. This museum has more than 18,000 bread-related items on exhibit. The Salt and Pepper Shaker Museum is located in Tennessee and is sure to shake up your next vacation. Do you like to eat instant ramen? If you do, you might want to make a stop at the Cup Noodles Museum in Japan. A lot of people are scared of clowns, but if you're not, you might want to visit the Clown Hall of Fame and Research Center located in Wisconsin. Lastly, there's a whole museum devoted to the meat in a can. Spam, 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 spam. Make sure to stop in the next time you're in Austin, Minnesota, otherwise you might be a little salty you missed it.
We've already heard about a few cool jobs at the museum, but wait, there's more. Let's add 3 more big and important jobs to the team. First, let's talk about a museum preparator. A museum preparator puts up and takes down all of the art pieces in the museum. They look after the installation of the things you hear and the things you see on the screens, and even unpack new art for the collection and pack objects to be shipped to a new location. A preparator is great at building things. They often construct and take down the movable walls in the museum. They design and build shipping containers so art and sculptures can safely travel, and they even design and build the furniture in the museum. Next, the educator in your school classroom is called a teacher, but the teacher at the museum is called an educator. A museum educator gives presentations about items in the museum. They research a lot of information about the things you see so that they can teach you all of the things that they've learned. Educators are awesome writers. They're good at speaking in front of a lot of people, and they're also friendly and love to teach kids like you. The last job we're going to discuss is a conservator. A conservator works hard to keep the art in excellent condition. Let's think of a jug of milk. We know that we have to place milk in a cold refrigerator because if we leave it on the counter, it'll spoil and we'll have to throw it out. The same idea goes for art. Art pieces are made out of many different materials, so a conservator studies the materials and learns how to preserve the art. They're scientists. A conservator's job can be big and small. Dust is made of acids that can harm paintings and sculptures, so a conservator will frequently go out on the floor and dust all of the art using special dusting tools. They also do big jobs that involve fixing artwork that has been damaged. When you go to the doctor for a checkup, they might give you an x-ray, and conservators do this too. They x-ray art pieces to ensure the art is healthy and find any problems before they become even bigger problems. When art pieces become damaged, conservators have to practice extreme patience because figuring out how to fix the problem could take days, months, or even several years to solve. Which of these museum jobs would you like to have when you grow up?
We've learned so much today about museums, but the fun doesn't have to stop once you leave the building. Check out these titles from your local Fort Worth Public Library branch using either curbside or in-person pickup. Parker Looks Up, An Extraordinary Moment by Parker Curry and Jessica Curry, illustrated by Brittany Jackson. When a nearby museum goer snapped a photo of a mesmerized Parker, it became an internet sensation. Inspired by this visit, Parker and her mother tell the story of a young girl and her family whose trip to the museum becomes an extraordinary moment. How the Meteorite Got to the Museum by Jesse Hartland. This nonfiction book traces how a rock broke from its billion-year orbit to fall from space onto the trunk of a teenager's car, then to several natural history museums. Museum Day by Cindy McKay, illustrated by Meredith Johnson. This book follows a young girl and her dad as they spend a fun-filled day exploring all the fascinating exhibits in a museum. Along the way, a little bird adds some delightful humor as it manages to get into the museum and follows the girl and her dad through the exhibits. Ophelia and the Marvelous Boy by Karen Foxley. Ophelia, a timid 11-year-old girl grieving her mother, suspends her disbelief in things non-scientific when a boy locked in the museum where her father is working asks her to help him complete an age-old mission. How to Build a Museum by Tanya Bolden. This book chronicles how ideas, ambitions, and actual objects came together to create the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. Don't forget that your local branch of the Fort Worth Public Library offers binge boxes for you to pick up. This one is the Family Misadventures and features all 3 of the Night at the Museum movies. Ooh, this is my favorite part. Like a lot of other institutions around the world, the Amon Carter Museum of American Art had to move all of their programming online during the COVID-19 pandemic. They have a great archive of videos, including their virtual toddler studio, on their Facebook page. A lot of museums have put their collections online for people to view around the world. Some of these museums include the British Museum in London, the Guggenheim Museum in New York, the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and the National Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City. Visit the Google Arts and Culture website by going to artsandculture.google.com. There's so much to look at you could spend years exploring this website. The Smithsonian offers 11 museums and galleries on the National Mall, plus 6 other museums and the National Zoo in the greater National Capital Area. But they also offer a robust YouTube channel as well. They have almost 3,000 videos uploaded for you to watch. Don't forget that Fort Worth offers plenty of museums for you to experience yourself, like the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History, the Kimball Art Museum, the Amon Carter Museum of American Art, the Modern Art Museum, the National Cowgirl Museum and Hall of Fame, and many more. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.